So if you're first getting introduced to Perfect Resize, it's a program that allows you to enlarge your images up to 1,000%, all without loss of detail. And we're the industry standard for image resizing. So a lot of the companies that you're going to see using us are ones that blow their images up for things like signs and banners and billboards. So we're a professionally used program, which is really, really great. Now, one of the great things about Perfect Resize is we've included a lot of brand new options that make it easier to get in and out a lot quicker. We've got a brand new preset library and brand new resizing options. We've got a crop tool that allows you to resize and crop all in the same step. And then we allow you to do things like create gallery wraps, create tiled images. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to do all these different things. And really quickly, I always like to show this before and after so you can actually see the difference between how Photoshop enlarges on the left-hand side and then how we enlarge on the right-hand side. What happens when you resample an image without using the algorithm that we have in Perfect Resize is you don't end up saving a lot of the sharpness and detail in a photo. You end up losing it and it creates this kind of soft blur over your image. Whereas on the right-hand side, you'll see there's that really nice crisp line where the background meets the edge of the frog's eye between all of those scales on his face. And that's the algorithm, the genuine fractals algorithm that we include in Perfect Resize that lets you maintain that sharpness. So I'm going to talk to you about how to use the program and a lot of the little idiosyncrasies that help make it work a little bit easier and a little bit faster. So I'm going to start out in Lightroom and I'm going to go over some really quick basics just in case you guys don't know them. Now, while I'm doing the webinar, I have the question panel open and I'll try and look at those while I'm going. However, I'm going to be answering a lot of questions towards the end. So if there is something you want to know or if there's something specific that you want to watch me do or talk about a little bit, type that up in that question panel and I'll be answering those towards the end. So inside Lightroom, just really quick beginning, if you need to get to Perfect Resize, you've got two different ways. You can take an image and right click it or control click it and go to edit in and you'll see Perfect Resize down there. And then if you go up through the file menu, go to plugin extras, you'll also see Perfect Resize there as well. So two different ways you can get to it. I'm just going to right click on my image. I'll go down to edit in and I'll select Perfect Resize. Now this is really, really important when you're working with Resize, and this is something that I always like to mention. Before you even go into the program, it's really important that you create a copy of your original image. You always want to be able to save your work. And if you upsize it and you don't end up liking it or you want to resize it even more, you always want to have your original image to start out with. So if you're in Photoshop, you're going to want to duplicate your image and you're going to want to make sure that you duplicate it and save that copy before you go into resize. It's going to be the same with Aperture. You always want to make sure you're editing and creating a duplicate of your image. You always want to have your, as strange as it is, you always want to have your small original so that just in case you do the resizing and you want to change the algorithm a little bit, you want to add some sharpening, you want to go back into resize and redo it, whatever it might have been, always want your original photo. So going through Lightroom, I always make sure that I select this option, and it's edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So I've gone in and I've added effects to this image, you'll see it. I've added kind of some effects to this portrait, and I did a couple of basic Lightroom adjustments. So I want to edit a copy with my Lightroom adjustments. And now when I go ahead and click edit, you'll see it really fast. It creates a copy of that image for me. So now I'll always have my original smaller Photoshop file, and now I've got the one that I'm going to resize. So inside Perfect Resize, there are a couple things that I want to start out talking about. And the first thing that's really important inside Resize is going to be on the right-hand side, and it's these top two panes, pixel dimensions and document size. They're going to be the most important when it comes to resizing. And these are the things that you're going to want to watch because this is what's important to making your image larger or smaller. So right now, when I first open up an image, inside the document size pane, this image right now is about 7.7 by 5.5. This is not a very large image. It's pretty small. So at 300 resolution, so pixels per inch, I can only print this image out at around 7 by 5. That's pretty small. So you'll see right up at the top, my pixel dimensions are also not that great. Now, one of the things that's really cool that I always like to talk about is if you take the width and the height of your pixel dimensions. So right now, The width of my image is 2,334. If you take that number and you multiply it by your height, it equals the megapixels of your image. So if you open up, I know this is kind of a strange and it's kind of a nerdy thing, but I always like to tell people this because it is really cool. When you open up an image straight from your camera, if you don't know what megapixel camera you have and you've always wanted to know, just open that image up and look at the pixel dimensions, and you'll see this image right now. I took it on a larger camera, but I downsized it a little bit for the web. So right now it's at 3 megapixels. So this is not a very large camera, or this is not a very large image. It doesn't have a lot of pixel information. I took this with a 5D Mark II at the time, and the megapixels and the pixel information that I pull in is a lot larger. That original image is huge because the megapixels of that camera are like 20, I think it's like 22. So a really cool trick is if you take the pixel dimensions, width and height, and you multiply them, that's the megapixels of your camera. So just in case you ever wanted to know that. Now, inside the document size pane, before we even talk about how to upsize, I want to talk to you guys about something called resolution. And this is really important about your image. And this is something that when you're shooting in your camera, there are a couple of different settings that you can do to make sure that you're shooting in a larger resolution. And one of them is shooting in RAW. You never want to shoot in JPEGs because your resolution is a very small number. Now, what pixels per inch is exactly what it is, or exactly what it sounds like. The number of pixels per inch in this image are around 300. So that means every single inch that I zoom up into, there's 300 plus pixels in that little inch. That's a lot of pixels. Whereas when you're shooting usually JPEGs on a camera, it automatically saves your image at a 72 pixels per inch ratio, which means that when you're shooting at that smaller number and you zoom into that inch, you're going to have larger pixels, and it's going to be a little bit more confusing because you're going to be looking at your image and you're going to be seeing all these nasty, like, square pixels in your photo. So one of the reasons why photographers are always talking about how they shoot in RAW is because you get a larger resolution, which means there are more pixels per inch, which means that you have more pixels that you can manipulate and look great. When you have smaller amounts of pixels per inch, you're editing an image where you're going to get that weird pixelated look. So this resolution box right here is really important. This image was shot at a large resolution, so I have a lot of pixel information still there, which is really great. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can resize the image. And there was a question that was brought up yesterday during my full-length webinar, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it. I usually do when I'm doing my resize webinars is the way that the program works is by resampling. So what that means is we're taking the information from the image and we're creating more pixels. And it may sound bad, sounds kind of daunting, like we're making up these pixels for absolutely no reason. But when you upsize an image, you have to resample. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an image where the pixels are going to look horrible. You have to basically create new pixels so that you still have a nice large resolution so that when you look at the image, you're not going to be staring at those square pixel edges. When you look at an image that's pixelated, you know it, and it usually looks really bad. So by resampling and adding in those pixels and adding in that information, it's actually a good thing because we're making sure that we're maintaining all of that information from your original image. So remember that when you're upsizing, we are adding in pixel information, but it's your pixel information. It's your image. We're not adding it all in willy-nilly. It's all information that we're pulling from your photo using this genuine fractals algorithm that we created here at On1 Software. It was our first product, so we love genuine fractals. That's what it used to be called. Now it's called Perfect Resize. But the algorithm that was created for this program is really important. And it's a different way of resampling than any other program that exists out there. Now, to resize my image, I've got a whole bunch of different options. The first one is just by typing in information in this document size pane. So if I want to, I can just type in a brand new width. So let's say I have a 16 by 20 piece of paper. I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of a white edge around my image. And I know that I'm going to want my width around if it's 16 by 20, I'll probably want it maybe about 16 as the width. So I've got 2 inches on each side. So I'll just type in 16 and you'll see it automatically resizes my image. I didn't have to do anything. It already went in there, did that information for me. It's going to upsize it when I click apply, and we're good to go. You'll see right down here that this box, constrained proportions, has been checked, and that's really important that it stays checked. Constrained proportions means that it's going to keep the width and the height locked. So if I turned this off, it's going to stretch my image out into a funky way. So if you're going to be upsizing with this document size pane right here, you always want to make sure that you keep this constrained proportions on. So I would print my image out here. It looks like it'd be 16 by 11.4-ish, which is not a typical size. I want to be able to actually upsize this image, and I want to be able to fit it into a frame. So I want to make sure that I'm upsizing it to something where if I give it to someone, you don't want to give someone an image that's 16 by 11.4 because they're going to go out looking for a frame that doesn't actually exist. And if it does, I'd be shocked. You'd have to go and get a custom frame. So there are a lot of basic photo sizes that you're going to see when you're walking up and down, I always go to the art store to look at frames because they always have really cool frames. But when you're walking up and down the aisleway, you're going to be looking at frame size, and you see a lot of typical sizes: 2 by 3, 4 by 5, 5 by 7, 8 by 10, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, 20 by 24, and so on. So you're going to see a pretty specific range of sizes in there. And sometimes you'll see a little bit of variation between those sizes, but those are going to be pretty typical. So up here in the preset drop-down menu, I'll pop that open really quick. We have a drop-down menu that allows you to choose a specific size. And this is really great because it allows you to choose something that you know you're going to end up using. I have no idea what dimensions this image actually is. I don't know whether I could crop it into an 8 by 10 automatically. I don't remember what I shot it at. I don't really remember that much about this image other than I took it. But if I upsize this to 8 by 10, is it going to fit perfectly? Am I going to have to crop it down, and so on? And that's what this preset drop-down menu helps you do, is find a size that's specific. And a lot of times that's what I like to do when I'm printing out my images. I have a photo wall in my apartment, and it's nice, and it's it literally is a whole wall, top to bottom, just all photos. And I bought 4 different sizes: 4 by 5, 5 by 7, 8 by 10, and 16 by 20. So those are always going to be the 4 sizes that I use, whether they're horizontal or vertical. So I always know that I'm going to go down to my photographic category. So these are all these basic photo sizes, and you'll see the ones that I just shouted out in this drop-down menu. So this is a really great way to upsize when you know that you're going to be printing it out and you're going to be giving it to someone and they're going to want it a specific size. So for this image, I want to go up to 11 by 14. So we'll just go ahead and I'll select that. Now, when you select a preset from this drop-down menu and it's specific, so 11 by 14, it's going to automatically apply a crop box to your image because you're probably going to need to crop your photo down. So that's really important to note. Is for this image, I'm going to have to crop it in a little bit. It's not quite the right dimensions to print out at 11 by 14, so it automatically applies that crop box for me, which is really great. Now, one of the things that's also really important to note about this document size pane is if you're using this preset drop-down menu, we can go down and let's say we want to crop it down to 16 by 16. We want to do a square crop. I can click and drag my crop box into place, and you'll see anytime that I have changed the width and the height in any way, whether it be through the preset drop-down menu or just typing it in, that resolution stays the same. So if you have an image that's at 300 resolution, like mine is right now, I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm going to lose resolution. That's going to stay exactly the same, and that's really, really great, because I don't have to worry about it going all over the place and swapping between different presets. This is going to be the most important thing about this document size pane, is I can resize it. If I have that large resolution, I can resize it and I don't have to worry about swapping that over to something that doesn't end up working with my image. If I want to change the resolution, so if you have an image that's, you'll see like web size is typically 72 pixels per inch. I was talking about that earlier. So when you pull images off of the web, you'll see there's 72 or 90 are typically the 2 numbers that you'll see, which is not a lot of pixel information. So you can open up this resolution drop-down menu right here, and you'll see you can go in and you can choose a brand new resolution. And again, it's going to resample your image and kind of resituate all of those pixels in your photo using that genuine fractals algorithm. And we've actually included kind of some smart things that you can take a look at next to these resolutions, ones that you might be working for. So if you have an image that's 72 pixels per inch, that's typical for computer monitors. So you'll see when you download an image off of the web, it's usually going to be at 72 pixels per inch, and that's really typical. If you go up a little bit at 100 pixels per inch, that's where you're going to be printing on a billboard. No one's staring at a billboard up close, so you don't actually need all that pixel information when you're printing out an image that's going to be seen from upwards of a mile away. If you upsize to billboard size, you don't need all that pixel information. You can print it out. It can look a little pixelated because when you pull back, the entire image is what's important, not looking at it super close. Now, the numbers that are going to be the most important are typically 300 or 360. And these are going to be the pixels per inch that you're going to use when you're doing general photo printing or small format printing, which is what most people end up doing. So most people end up printing under 20 by 24. Not a lot of people go much larger than that. But if you start out at 72 pixels per inch, all you need to do is select 300 or 360 pixels per inch from this drop-down menu, and it's automatically going to upsize your resolution to whatever number you choose. So that's how you change your resolution here inside Perfect Resize. And now I've got my 16 by 16 square. I've made sure my resolution is at 300, so I'm ready to print. And if this is going to be my final step, I can go in and I can press apply, and it's going to create a 16 by 16 that is going to go and stack with my original image inside Lightroom. So if you save into Photoshop, it'll save on that duplicate file, because don't ever forget to make your duplicate. But it'll save on that duplicate file. You'll have your original, and then you'll also have your brand new, mine is going to be 16 by 16 image. So I'm going to go down and reset everything. We're going to start from scratch. I'm going to show you how to use the presets on the left-hand side. So if you don't want to go through the trouble that I just went through, where you're typing in numbers and trying to figure out what size this is, if you have an image like this one that's kind of a weird size, I don't even remember how it got to this size, honestly. The original image was shot with a really great camera, and then I've edited it and I've changed it and I placed it online and I downloaded it from online and I've passed it around for other people's use and all this kind of stuff. So I have no idea how it ended up this size. On the left-hand side in the library, you'll see you've got a whole bunch of different options, and this is a great place to start if you're not 100% sure what to do when you first get into Perfect Resize. So I have an Epson large format printer at home, and I typically print on resin-coated paper or matte paper. So matte paper is just pulp-based paper with no resin or no plastic that's placed on top. Resin-coated paper are anything that has a basic amount of resin on top of the pulp. So that includes like luster papers, glossy papers, a lot of fine art papers still have still have kind of a resin coating on top of them. They treat the paper so that it's not actually a real matte paper. Not a lot of people print on matte paper anymore, which is sad because it's such a great paper. But most papers that people use nowadays are resin-coated papers. So if that's what you're using, you can open up your printer category and your paper category. So we'll go to Epson Resin Coated, and you'll see we've got all of these pre-made sizes that are specific for printing on whatever printer and whatever paper type. Now, when you apply any of these, so we'll go back to that 16 by 16. So I'll just click on a preset. It'll apply it to my image. And I can click and drag this into place. And one of the things that you'll notice is the image got a little bit sharper. And the reason why is these presets also include a little bit of sharpening that goes along with it. So it's adjusting your document size, it's adjusting some of the settings, and then it's also going down and it's applying a little bit of sharpening that's specific to the printer and the paper type. So if I go over, let me open up the sharpening pane right here, you'll see it added a progressive sharpening. It added a very, very small amount. So 25 is a very small amount of sharpening. and it went in and it's making sure that it's protecting the highlights and the shadows for me automatically. So just a little bit, but it's making sure that it's not adding too much sharpening to the highlights in the image, so like maybe on his shirt and on his forehead, and it's not adding too much sharpening to the shadows like behind the leaves and on her hair. So without me having to actually do anything, it's already applied sharpening, resized my image. It upsized my resolution automatically to 360 because I'm going to be printing on that Epson printer on resin coated paper. So it knows I need a larger, it knows that I need a larger resolution size, and I'm good to go. Now, I can go in and I can show you really quick. Let me reset this. And we're going to start again from scratch. And I want to show you, there are a lot of questions, it looks like, about tiling and what tiling is and how to do it. So that's how you would use presets in here. One of the things I always like to mention is if you like the preset, save it as a favorite. So I always end up printing, you'll see if you go to my favorites category, there's two that were already there, and it's matte paper 16 by 20 and 20 by 24. I always print 16 by 20, it's my favorite size, I love it. So I automatically always upsize my images to 16 by 20. It's just how I do. It's what I do, and it's my favorite size. So I save that in my favorites category. So I always go there straight automatically. Now, if you're interested in tiling your image, let's go ahead and we'll upsize my image to that square. Let's go up to 16 by 16 again. So I'm just going to upsize my image to 16 by 16. I don't know why I'm liking the square crop right now. Maybe it's because I've been staring at my phone all day, and Instagram is always square crops, and I always like that square crop. So I'll go in and I'll upsize my image, and I'll go over, it's 16 by 16, and then I'll go down here. Let me close those panes so you can see it, and I'm going to turn my tiling pane on. So one of the things that the tiling pane is really, really great for is if you have a small format printer, so if you have one that only prints, let's say 8 by 10, and you want to print out an image at 16 by 16, you can tile your image down and print out pieces at a time and then basically combine them after you've printed them out. So you've probably seen it. There's a lot of really cool stuff. If this might be my guilty pleasure and I might be embarrassing myself right now, but there's always these really cool framing ideas that you see on Pinterest. And a lot of times people tile different parts of the image together and they print them out on things like metal and canvas, and then they put the pieces together to recreate the image on their wall. And a lot of times people do that because they don't have a printer that prints that large and they don't want to pay someone to do it. So the tiling pane allows me to print those small spots, and it does it along with that resizing. So that crop box information, that 16 by 20 or 16 by 16 crop box, is still there. So you'll see this area that's grayed out is wherever I'm going to be cropping my image out of. And inside the crop box, you'll see that there are these bright cyan guidelines. And this is where I'm going to be cutting my image down and printing out the sections. So I can go in and 16 by 16, I'm just going to divide it down. We'll do 4 by 4 prints. So I'll type in a new width and a height. So I'll type in 4 by 4. And now you'll see there are these little 4 by 4 inch squares. I know it's a little hard to see, but there are these little 4 by 4 inch squares that now I can print out separately. So there's obviously 16 of them because it's 4 times 4. So there are these 16 little squares, and I can print all of these squares out on my, let's say I've got 5 by 7 paper. I can print all these squares out on 5 by 7 paper, chop them down with my paper cutter, and then I can put them into place. You also have the option of doing something called overlapping, which means that if you want to make sure that your image looks really seamless when you place it together, you can use what's called the overlapping feature. So if you want to make sure that there's at least 1 inch of overlap, you'll see when I typed in 1 inch, it's gone in and it's created this little section that's going to be reprinted on each area. So if you want to overlap so that your image automatically gets perfectly back together, you can do that. I typically like it when there's a little bit of space in between my tiles. I think it looks kind of cool. especially there's this really cool thing that you can do where you can attach all of the tiles with little rings, basically. So you can take all of your little papers and put hole punches in the bottom and the tops and sides of each one of those pieces, and then you can connect them all with rings. That's always a really cool way to do it. And there's a little bit of space in between your tiles, but it always ends up looking really cool. So now, once I've created all of my different tiles and I've gone in and I've done this information, so I've got 4x4, you'll see my output options are down here. I've got 16 tiles. I can select the type of image that I want exported as. So I'd export it as a TIFF because I want to get it ready to print. I can choose the place that I'm going to save all these new files out. And then once I click apply, it's going to automatically save 16 little 4x4-inch TIFFs that I can now print out from Lightroom. So I can just import them into Lightroom and I can go and I can print each one of them separately. So the tiling feature is really cool and is really, really useful, again, if you have a small printer and you want to be able to print big. And believe me, I understand that my senior thesis in college was billboard sized, and I didn't print an actual billboard. I print multiple pieces, and hilariously enough, I used the tiling feature in the program. So I ended up tiling my images into a couple different pieces, and then I pushed them together when I finally ended up printing them out. So the tiling feature is super useful if you want to print really big and you don't have the means to do so. I didn't, so I had to basically connect a lot of smaller pieces together to create something that was really, really large. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that tiling feature off. Now underneath is our gallery wrap feature, which allows you to go in and add a gallery wrap to your image. And I've already resized my image to 16 by 16. That crop box is staying there. So when I turn my gallery wrap pane feature on, it saves that 16 by 16 wrap, or that 16 by 16 size when it applies the wrap. And the gallery wrap, all it's doing is it's going in and it's adding edge information around my central image. So my central photo here is still 16 by 16 and it's adding information around the edges. It's not cutting into your image. Now, there's a different type of gallery wrap, and I always select something called Reflect Soft. So what it's doing is it's reflecting your image, but it's adding a soft blur to your photo. So it's softening those edges that are going to be wrapped around those wooden panes when you create a canvas. So if you stretch your own canvas and you stretch your own images and you do this at home, what happens is you need information to wrap around that canvas and it creates a really nice streamlined look. And I like it when the edges aren't in focus, they're kind of soft, so that it brings your eye into the actual image and everything else kind of drops out in this like soft blur. You can change the amount of thickness too. So if you need at least 4 inches to wrap around your image, you just type in a different thickness number and it goes in and it adds that reflection for you automatically. When you go ahead and click apply, this is going to be a 16 by 16 inch image with 4-inch edges on each side, which means that the image is technically now going to be 24 by 24. Did I do that math right? I did. So you don't do a lot of math in the photo world, or at least I don't. So when I click apply, my image is technically going to be 24 by 24 because it saved this 16 by 16 inch area in the center, and then it added information around the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that gallery wrap off right there because I don't technically need a gallery wrap with this image. Now, another thing that's really cool is you can save presets if there's a specific gallery wrap feature that you like. If there's a specific type of sharpening that you really like, you can save presets and you could reuse them later. You can also batch process, and that's the next thing I want to show you how to do really quickly. So if I'm back in Lightroom, we pop back over to Lightroom. We'll open up a set of images. I've got all these photos and they're from traveling, and I can go in and I can select a whole set of photos and I can batch process them together and I can resize them all together. So I can go up to the File menu, go down to Export inside Lightroom, and in the Export to drop-down menu, if I go down to Perfect Resize 7.5, you'll see that right down here, I can go to and select a preset. So I know that I want to print on Epson matte paper and I want to print Epson say we want to upsize all these images to 20 by 30. I'll go in and I'll select my preset, and then when I go ahead and click export, after I do all of my Lightroom export settings, I can go in and all of these images are going to be automatically upsized to the exact same amount. So that's always really helpful. If you've got a set of images that are all, I don't know, 4 by 5 and they're all 72 pixels per inch, you can upsize them all to the exact same size, which is really great. And that's where creating your own presets is really nice. You can open up one image, resize it, make sure it looks really nice, and then you can apply the exact same settings to all the other images that were taken on the same day. So that's really helpful, that batch processing. Now, back inside Perfect Resize, I'm going to go through and we still have quite a bit of time left, but a lot of times when people watch the Perfect Resize webinars, they like their questions answered, because a lot of times what happens is you're using Resize and you want to watch someone actually do it. So these were kind of basics about resizing inside Perfect Resize, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a look at some of these questions and see what you guys actually want to know. So let me start my image from scratch. So I've got my original photo here. I've done nothing to it, and I can show you guys whatever you want to know. All right, so it looks like the first question in here is, sorry, it's a little bit small. I have to put on my reading glasses. The first question is, could you please give us some sort of a formula or guidelines for knowing how large a particular image can be made without it losing quality? Yes and no, unfortunately. The program prints or resizes up to 1,000%. So you'll see in the pixel dimensions box right here, which I accidentally just closed, my image is at 100%. I can upsize this to 1,000. One of the things that's really important about printing images from small to large is you are always, 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 when you're printing large images, you are never looking at it up close. So I have a tiny image, 7 by 5, technically a 3 megapixel image. It's very small. If I upsize this to, we'll go down and we'll select kind of a large size. So we'll go to 24 by 30 and we upsize the image. It's going to go in, it's going to do its magic. Let me turn my sharpening off so you don't have to stare at the sharpening. I can go in and I can upsize my image, and let me zoom in a little bit. If I view this image at 100%, which now is a lot closer than it would have been with my image at 5 by 7, when I go in and I enlarge my image quite a lot, so I've enlarged it 431%, which is big. That's a lot of information that I just added in there and a lot of pixels. You're never going to be viewing your image at 100%. If you're staring at this up on your wall, you don't want to walk up to this image and have a foot between you and your photo, and you don't want to be staring up at all the little pieces. Now at 100%, you can see that there's still really good information here. I've got a lot of solid lines in between, like his nose and all of his hairs down here. You can see all this information in between his hairs. You can see all of these lines in between the leaves. So when I view it at 100%, it still looks good as an image, but you got to remember that when you upsize an image, you're adding all this pixel information. You always want to view a printed image pulled out a little bit more. So I'm not going to be viewing my photo up on a wall a foot away, staring at all of the little details like a freak. It's really absurd. You would never look at a billboard up close because you need to pull back to see the entire image. It's why when you go into a museum, you don't walk up to a Jackson Pollock painting and you stare at all the little pieces. You pull back and you look at the entire thing. So I can still see a lot of really nice detail information here around the edges of the photo, in between all of his freckles. I mean, like all that freckle information on his face has been saved, all the hairs, but I can upsize it quite a bit and it looks pretty good, but there is no specific formula for upsizing. As long as you keep it under 1,000%, you're going to be pretty good. If you're going to be taking a tiny, 10 by, let's say like 2 by 2 inch photo that you found online, and it's a tiny little dinky JPEG, it's 72 pixels per inch, and you want to upsize it to 16 by 20, it's not going to look very good. we're going to do the best we can with it, but a tiny, tiny, tiny little image like that doesn't have enough information to be upsized. It has some information, so if you want to upsize a 2-inch by 2-inch print to maybe 8 by 8, that's going to be a lot easier to do. So there are limitations to the size of your original image and how large it's going to eventually be. So let's see. There was another question about, could you explain how to put the tiles together? But hopefully I answered that. When you print the tiles out, let me go back to my original image. When you put the tiles together, it's up to you whether you want to overlap them. Like I was showing, you can add that overlap information. If you don't want to overlap them, I really like the space in between the tiles. The space between the tiles is completely up to you. When you print out, for this image, it was 4-inch by 4-inch pieces. When you push together those 4-inch by 4-inch pieces, it's once you print them out and they're all set to go, it's completely up to you how you want to put them back together. But you got to remember, you're printing all these little pieces out separately and then combining them in your own way. There was a question about what I was multiplying earlier at the beginning. If you take the original pixel information, so pixel dimensions, pixels width by pixels height, and you multiply them together, that's the megapixel of your camera that you shot your image with, or the megapixel of whatever camera was used to shoot whatever photo. So if you're borrowing a friend's camera and you want to know how much pixel information you got, if you multiply the original image's pixel width by height, you'll get the megapixel of your image. There was a question, can tiling be used to prepare overlapping panoramic images? Yes, that would actually be a really great thing to do. So if you have a panorama, what you can do is, let's turn our tiling on. You can go in and let's say you have a panoramic image. This obviously looks really stupid because it's not a panoramic image, but you get the idea. Let's say this is a giant panorama. We can go in and we can type in the height of the image. So I know that the height of my image is 24 inches. So let's say you have a panorama that's 24 by, I don't know, 72 inches. If you type in the height as the exact same as your document size, so we'll type in 24. Now, all of my little cyan boxes that you can see are the same height of my image. And I can type in, so, that 24 by 72 inch panorama, I can type in, let's say I want 24 by 8 inch slices. And you can go in and you can basically print slices of the image. And you can do that both ways as well. So using this to create a really cool panorama is something I've seen someone do it, where they took a panoramic image and they printed it out into 3 pieces and then combined it together. And that's a really great thing to do. It's really cool. Just type in the height correctly right here for your tiling, and it'll print top to bottom and then whatever width you want. All right, let's see. Let's see. There was a question about, so this original image, let me reset it really quick. So again, this image is very small. I'm gonna turn my tiling off because I don't need it. This image is pretty small. So resolution 300, the width is 5 by 7. If I go zoom into 100%, there isn't a lot of information there. So let me zoom in quite a bit. You can see there's a lot of pixel edges that you can see. So all those little pixel squares. There's a question about showing results. And I understand. I've been using this program since I was in college, and it's the reason why I work for this company. So I started using Perfect Resize because my senior thesis was billboard sized, and I was shooting images on a dinky digital camera, and I wanted to be printing out photos that would make an impact. And so I printed upwards of 20 inches wide. So I printed out pretty large photos, and I ended up having to upsize twice. So when you start out with an image like this, where when you zoom in close, this is upwards of 200% zoomed in. You can see all of this pixel information. So I can see that there are these nasty squares in between the nose and the glasses on his face. And when you're upsizing this image, I can show you results and I can show you exactly what it's going to look like when I enlarge it. You know, we'll do 600% and we'll see how big we can get it. The only way that you're going to see results is when you print it out. I can show you what it looks like on the computer screen, but my computer screen and yours are at a very small resolution. This computer that I use is basic. It's a pretty simple run-of-the-mill computer. And when you're looking at the computer screen, it's going to get as close as it can to printing out. But what you're actually going to see when you print it out are the results. So I can't show you a print on the computer, and I could take a picture of a print and I could show you what it looks like. But the way that you're going to see results are by physical prints. And it's one of the things we always bring out photos at a lot of our conventions, and we show people what they look like. So we have these huge banners that we bring that have been upsized by like 400 or 500 or 600%, and we bring them to all of the conventions so people can physically see them, because Resize is a very difficult program to show on a computer, because this is not a computer-based program. It is for printing. If you're downsizing, you can do it very easily using a bicubic smoother inside of Photoshop. You don't need to downsize specifically in here. This is for upsizing and printing. So if you want to see results, you need to print out your images. And this, let me upsize it and we'll go nice and big. So you're looking at the original image, and we'll go to 30 by 40. I don't know how large the percentage is here. And it's going to take a minute because it's got to actually resize the image. And we'll zoom into 100% and we'll let it load, because we just resized the image by quite a bit. But we'll zoom into the exact same place so you can actually see it. While it loads, I'm just going to look and see if there are any other questions. There was a question about the gallery wrap feature. You'd have a question when I was showing earlier that 16 by 16 image. You'd have a print at 24 by 24. Yes, you would. So if you're adding 4 inches of a gallery wrap around your entire image, you're going to have a print that's 24 by 24. The 16 by 16 is going to go in the center of the gallery wrap, so the center of that canvas, and the 4 inches are going to be wrapped around the wooden bars. So if you've ever seen a canvas, there's a little bit of canvas that goes around the wood bars on that canvas, and that's where that edge information is going. So your center image that's going to go in the center of that canvas is still going to be 16 by 16. There is another question. Does it matter if you use a different kind of paper on Epson or Canon, like Canson? No, it doesn't. So these are really basic presets. They're not going to go too overboard with the sharpening. There's slightly different algorithms with the sharpening between matte and resin-coated papers as well as canvas, because you're going to sharpen differently on each one of those surfaces. But if you're using Canson paper, I use it's called Moab paper, or I use Red River, because Red River has really great sizes. And they have very unique sizes and they have great paper. If you ever need a new paper company, you should look at Red River. But most of the papers that I use are resin coated. So I use a basic amount of sharpening, and it's going to work for any of the images that you're going to be placing in here, and any of the papers. So long as it's resin coated or matte or canvas, you're going to be just fine. So the printer type, some printers you're going to want a little bit more sharpening, and some you're going to want a little bit less sharpening. So it just depends on what you're doing, and that's why we have the printer type set. But honestly, they're all really close as far as presets go. So if you want to go in and just selectively add your sharpening, which is typically what I do, I type in a size or use the crop tool and I just crop my image into a new size, and then I just go in and I add my sharpening from there. That's typically what I do in my personal work, and I print a lot of images. I worked as a custom fine art printer, and I've worked with a lot of artists, and I've worked with a lot of printers and a lot of people, and I've done bulk orders, and then I have done like single images that were printed 182 inches long, and like I did large panoramas for this artist in Boston, and it was 40 inches top to bottom, and they'd be like 180 to like 200 inches long. And we'd be using programs. We used a Perfect Resize, and then we went in and we selectively added sharpening where we needed it. But Sharpening, I always end up adding at the end, and it honestly isn't that specific to a printer or paper type. I add a little bit more when I'm printing on matte paper because you lose a lot of information on matte paper. And resin coated paper, I always go a little underboard because the way that the resin coats the paper, it tends to make it just look a little bit sharper. I don't really know how to describe what it visually looks like through a microphone. So you can use the presets and you can play around with that sharpening and you can create your own preset if you want to. So it just depends on what you want to do. There's a question about, do you downsize in Photoshop or resize? I would downsize in Photoshop. You don't need to downsize here. It really doesn't make that much of a difference where you downsize. Because if you're going from a large image, so say you've got a I have a 5D Mark III, and that's what I use, and I do images through that. And if I want to downsize my image, I'll just do it really quickly in Photoshop because it's not going to make that much of a difference, especially if I'm saving for the web. I want to get it ready to go up on my blog and I want to be done with it and be good to go. So I just downsize and I'm good. Let's see. Can we make a custom sized print like 16 by 24? Oh, I print a lot on Red River's 17 by 25 paper because Red River is awesome. Yes, you can. Let me show you how to do that. Oh, really quickly. This is the upsized image. This is now 30 by 40. I've upsized this almost 600%. So this is 539%. And at 100% zoomed in view, there's still a surprising amount of detail with this image. Now, if I'm looking at this up super close, I can still see the fact that he has eyelashes, he has hairs in his beard, he has edges between his gums and his teeth. I can still see the dimples in his cheeks. I can still tell that he has freckles on his face up there. I can see her eyeliner and her eyelashes. I can still see a lot of information. She has a hair that's right here. You can still see that hair. So just like when you're viewing a painting up close, it's going to be a little bit softer, but I can still see all of this edge information that's here. So it's all been saved. And if I printed this out at 30 by 40 and I put it up on a wall, it's going to look pretty darn good. I don't think I can say it's going to look pretty darn good when I place it up on my wall at 30 by 40, especially with an image that started at 5 by 7 inches. So when you imagine, like literally hold your hands out and try and put together a 5 by 7 inch image and then pull it out and imagine trying to save this much detail in that image. So this is what it's going to look like up at like 150% when you upsize an image 6,000 or 600%. So it is going to look softer and you're going to see, I call it a painterly look to it. It does have that soft painterly look, but that's what all of the great painters did. When you walk up close to an image, it's going to have that painterly quality to it. But when you pull out, it's going to look so crazy realistic that you're not really going to care. So that's what the whole post-Renaissance era was all about, was creating these images that were either so far from the truth or images that were so darn close that unless you looked up close, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a photograph or not. So it is going to have that kind of soft painterly quality, but as long as all of that edge information is still there and you can still tell that this is a nice image with crisp details in it. So again, the lines between his hairs, the fact that he still has wrinkles in between his eyes, you can still see all of his eyelashes. That's what's going to be the most important. So if you want to create a custom size, let me pull out and we'll start with our original photo and I'll show you how to do a custom size. So if you go up and you select your crop tool right here, we'll see I've got my crop tool selected. I can go in and I can create a custom size if I want to. So with my crop tool selected, if I go to my preset menu and I go down to custom, I can select manage custom sizes. And I will open up this custom document size presets box. And I can type the add button in and it's going to add whatever size I've upsized this image to. So this is a 7.7 by 5.5 inch image. And now if I want to reuse this, I can. Now, let me cancel out of this. I can go in and I can type in a specific number. So if I'm printing, looks like John wants to print 17 by 25. I know that my width needs to be 25. So I'll just type in 25 and then I'll type in 17 for the height. And now I've got a 25 by 17 inch image. And I can go in, and when I go down to my preset menu, I select custom, manage custom sizes, click on the add button. And now I've got an untitled preset that's 17 by 25 inches. And now I can reuse this again if I want to. So we can go in and we can rename it if we want. So this is my Red River paper preset. And now I've got a brand new size that I can reuse. So go ahead and click on OK. And this image is perfect for a 17 by 25. The reason why Red River uses 17 by 25 is it's a lot closer to what digital images are being captured at these days. So 8 by 10 is actually originally a size that was used for something called 4 by 5 film. 4 by 5 film is still used today. It's what most photographers used to use inside studios. So people like Richard Avedon used to use 4 by 5 cameras along with 8 by 10 inch cameras. And it literally is a 4 by 5 inch negative. And when you doubled that size, lo and behold, you've got 8 by 10. And so the printing sizes that we use today are related to that 4 by 5 inch ratio that was used with those negatives. Nowadays, we create a much larger format. It's called an HD format typically. And it's a longer image. And it's a lot closer to things like most computers nowadays are at 16 by 9 ratio, which means that it's got a much longer quality to it. So 4 by 5 is a little bit more compact. So what Red River does is Red River goes in and it's creating paper types that are closer to the longer format that we use today with digital images. So just in case you wanted to know that, you're now, you know that now. So, all right. So let's see. You got on resize settings, you got genuine fractals and perfect portrait resize. And what are the difference? So there's a settings pane right here. And the settings are the genuine fractals, the algorithm that we created. And if you open up the method drop-down menu, there are two methods. The genuine fractals algorithm is going to go in and it's going to be a little bit harsher about that edge information. The perfect resize portrait is going to be a little bit softer when it enlarges. So if you have an image that's quite up close, and actually the image that let me see if I can show it to you. The image that we use, that we printed out, is like 4,000 upsized. Let me show you the image that we use so it'll be easier so I can talk to you about it. So the image that we resized up to about 400% is this one. And the reason why we use perfect portrait resize is so that it keeps all of this information on her face softer. You don't want to over add information and detail to all of these pores and all of this information here. Most of the time you're going to want portraits to be slightly softer. So the perfect portrait resize option that you have, the only reason I ever suggest it is if you have a very close-up image and you want to make sure that all the information is a little bit softer. So typically I use the genuine fractals method just across the board, even when I'm doing portraits, because I like my portraits to be a little bit, I don't know, I like that information to all be there. So that's going to be the difference between the two. What do you use? There's another question. What do you use gallery wrap for in the real world? If you're printing a 16 by 20, what would I use the wrap for? The only time you would use the gallery wrap is when you're printing on canvas. So if you're someone who it's really popular nowadays. All you have to do is go online and type in canvas printing, and you can go on and you'll see that people are printing out their images to make them look like paintings. So they print it out on canvas, and it's just like a painting. So if you've ever wrapped a canvas before, what you do is you can combine these 4 wrapped wooden bars, you combine them together into a frame, and then you take canvas and you stretch it around so that you've got a really nice taut canvas in the center, and then you basically staple the canvas to the back side of the frame. And it's actually really annoying and really difficult. So if you've ever stretched canvas, it's exhausting because it's really hard to get that canvas nice and taut, which is why people pay others to do it. people want their images to look closer to that old school painting canvasy look. So the reason why you would use a gallery wrap in the real world is if you're creating a canvas print like that. And there are a lot of companies nowadays where that's all they do is you send them an image and they go in and they print it, and you can select whether you want your image wrapped around the edge like that gallery wrap pane does, or whether you want the outside of your canvas to be really to just be white, whatever you want to do. So the gallery wrap pane is used for if you're doing canvas printing. So just if you go online and you can look it up, you'll see it everywhere. People love the canvas printing thing right now. So other than that, you wouldn't be using that gallery wrap pane. There is no other reason to use it. So that's pretty much what it's there for. Let's see. When you have your resized image the way that you want it, should it look really good at 100%? Is that a good test? Yes and no. Again, it depends on what you're doing with your image. So again, if you're taking a small image, so let's say, we've got this image 5x7, and we want to enlarge it up to, I don't know, 50 by 70. Nothing is going to look good at 100%. Nothing. However, you can go in and look at it 100%, and you can take a look and see if those details held up. That's why I showed that 100% when we enlarged up to 600%. I went in and I zoomed into the image at 100%, and you could still see those details. However, the best way that you're going to take a look at your image is when you print it out. And I know that sucks because you have to go in and you have to waste paper, and that can be really annoying. But the best way to see whether your resizing is the way that you want it is to print your image out, or at least print out a piece of it. So that's why that tiling feature is also really cool. Tile out a piece that you actually want and maybe print out the part that's, he has this really nice, this is my brother in the image, by the way. My brother has this really nice, like perfectly coiffed hair. And that would be the part that I want in this image to remain nice and crisp and detailed. And I want all of their glasses. I want her eye makeup, that like nice streak, because she does these cat eyes. I would want all that information to be the same. So I might print out a tile, post it up on my wall, and step back and take a look at it. Just the way you would with paint chips when you're, getting ready to paint your wall. You don't walk up really close and inspect the paint, up close. You're going to step back and you're going to take a look at what it's going to look like around the rest of your room. So I would suggest printing out maybe part of your photo, putting it up on the walls, taking a step back, and then taking a look at it. So that's going to be the best way to do it. If you zoom into 100% and you don't really like what you see, you might have gone overboard. If you're enlarging up to 900% from a dinky little photo, it may not look super great. A lot of images are not meant to enlarge up to 1,000%. So again, unless you're doing large banners and large images on billboards and posters and huge signs, most people enlarge their images less than 400%. That's just how it is. So most people don't end up using that 1,000% resize option, just because most people don't need it. Unless you're a large company and you're using this for advertising, which a lot of people do. We have a lot of companies that buy from us to use this program for advertising. You're not going to be enlarging that much, and your image is still going to look pretty darn good when you upsize it. So